If you follow the road east from the main gate of Nuka World, eventually you find a dirt path that heads north, which still has tire tracks in it. At the end of this dirt path is Wixon's Shovel Museum. Yes, you heard that right. A museum dedicated to shovels. Just outside, we still see the pre-war flag of the United States of America flying proud. How it survived these past 200 years, we may never know, but the museum itself is a fascinating relic of pre-war America. Now, later in the game, once you've established a reputation here at Nuka World, when you walk up this dirt path, you'll find a gaggle of raiders waiting to charge up the road and attack the Shovel Museum. That's because inside the Shovel Museum, we'll find one of many enemy factions. They could be gunners, they could be super mutants, or they could be an enemy Nuka World faction. In this example, it's a bunch of scavengers. Harmless, neutral scavengers just exploring this shovel museum looking for valuable scrap. In this example, I'm playing my Evil Institute character, so of course, she opened fire, as did the pack raiders whom she allied with. But if you find this museum early in your gameplay, you find it devoid of enemies, giving you ample opportunity to explore it to your heart's content. The interior is completely trashed. 200 years have not been kind to the Shovel Museum, and yet we still find a few displays still functional. Against the eastern wall, we find our first plaque. British shovel fighters were some of the most feared and deadly warriors of the Revolutionary War. They were known for their pristine ditches and the uncanny ability to deflect rifle shot. Here we are to believe that during the Revolutionary War, British redcoats deflected American rifle shots using shovels. On the ground, we find a few shovels. These must have been the very shovels these British troops used in the Revolutionary War, and a couple of British mannequins dressed in Revolutionary War-era redcoats. Behind the counter, we find a suitcase with little loot and an advanced locked floor safe with a random assortment of loot. Back here, we see quite a collection of wonderful shovels. Gotta make sure you pick up a souvenir shovel before leaving the Shovel Museum gift shop. And standing right next to the checkout counter are two mannequins, a male and a female wearing pre-war clothing and holding a shovel. Savvy-eyed viewers will recognize this as an homage to the painting American Gothic by Grant Wood. However, instead of holding a pitchfork, he's holding a shovel. We just keep finding these shovels on the ground. But I'm not complaining. More to add to my shovel collection. Against the western wall, we find a line of display cases. The first plaque reads, "This shovel was used by our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln's cousin's neighbor, to prepare a latrine hole in 1862 that the president himself might have used." It's, when you own the Shovel Museum, you really gotta stretch things out, right? Anything that could possibly be worth mentioning is mentioned. And sure enough, right next to this plaque, we find the very shovel used to dig Abraham Lincoln's cousin's neighbor's latrine. I'll take that. The next plaque over reads, "Used by actor Keith McKinney in the film Ditch Diggers of Dusseldorf, this shovel was actually the stunt prop for the McKinney's shovel used in the more dangerous action sequences." This was a stunt shovel? I guess they didn't want to risk damaging the real shovel, so the shovel had a stunt shovel. Well, Keith McKinney is in the game. We can go meet him. You find Keith McKinney living as a robo-brain inside Vault 118. He has an important role in the murder mystery going on at Vault 118. He's Gilda Brosco's lover. Gilda Brosco was a film actress before the war, and we learn that these actors and actresses inside Vault 118 willfully chose to remove their brains and place them inside robo-brain chassis after being convinced by Burt Riggs, a former General Atomic scientist who lived in the vault with them. This is how they were able to live so long.
Is everyone all right?
In Keith and Gilda's parlor, where they practiced their stage plays, we can not only talk to Keith McKinney, but we see another item on display. In this display case, we find the Fence Buster, a baseball bat used by the actor in his film Swing for the Fence. The Fence Buster is a legendary baseball bat featured as a key piece of evidence in the murder mystery quest, which we can then use as a melee weapon. I'm bummed that the shovel we loot from this shovel museum is not a legendary melee shovel. Wouldn't that be epic to run around with your melee character wielding this legendary shovel formerly owned by none other than Keith McKinney? Somebody has got to make a mod like that. Just outside their door, we find a poster promoting one of Keith McKinney's films called The Fightin' Furies, Last Stand at Fort McGee, starring Keith McKinney and Stanley Van Robb. We actually see the credit sequence for this film when we visit the Eden Meadows Cinemas. This location deserves a video in its own right, but once you clear the ghouls and you take a look at the drive-in screen, we realize that these ghouls for the past 200 years have been watching a Keith McKinney film, The Fightin' Furies.
After this, I can't wait till we start live weapons training.
Incidentally, we learn from talking with Gilda that her primary social rival when she was alive was none other than Vera Keyes. That's right, the very same Vera Keyes whom we meet in Dead Money. Gilda was upset at Vera Keyes because Vera won the role in the film Love Sets Sail, a role that Gilda auditioned for. It's so great to see Bethesda tying in Fallout 4 with New Vegas. Anyway, back to the Shovel Museum, we can go ahead and loot this famous Hollywood prop and then move on to the next shovel on display, only it's not in its display case. The plaque reads, "The item you see before you is not technically a shovel, but an example of the long-handled spade, most popular sometime between April 3rd and April 7th, 1963. So for 4 days in American history, in 1963, this long-handled spade was popular. With whom, I wonder? And how do they gauge the popularity of garden tools? Are they trying to say that for 4 days in 1963, this long-handled spade sold better than a shovel? And that's why it deserves to be included in a museum? But wait, isn't that exactly what a shovel is? Isn't the only difference between a shovel and a garden spade the fact that a shovel has a longer handle? Wouldn't that just make a long-handled spade a shovel? I hope it sold them a lot of tickets. Next, we move towards the western wall. Here we find a shovel on display with a plaque that reads, "Private Jean-Luc Allard used this very shovel as he followed Napoleon's horse in ceremonial parades throughout Europe. Please do not touch." So this was used by a private in the French military during the Napoleonic Wars. Well, if you're reaching, I guess a private's shovel may work. I'll go ahead and take this to add to my collection. Next, against the northern wall, we see a display case that's been used as a table. I don't really see anything in this display case, but the plaque on the wall reads, "The first shovel originated in Neolithic times and was probably made using an animal's shoulder blade. This is a replica of what that shovel may have looked like if it were made in modern times in Mexico." So, not like a Neolithic shovel at all, but like a modern shovel made in Mexico. That's like pointing at a tire and saying this is what the very first wheel might have looked like if it were made in 2017 and out of rubber. Well, I mean, I gotta hand it to them. They're doing everything they can to be creative and to draw people to their museum. God bless them. We find a few more shovels in some display cases. These sadly don't have any plaques. We do find a combat knife, but who needs a combat knife when you can get all of these wonderful shovels? We can then head upstairs. The upstairs portion appears to be some sort of office. We find a number of busted out terminals. Goodness, I wonder how many employees this shovel museum had to employ, necessitating all of these terminals. The only one, however, that works lies on a desk towards the east. Inside this terminal, we find a number of garbled messages. We can't read these, the files are corrupted. The employee who owned this terminal was R something. All we know is his last name started with J. The final entry says, "Letter of Resignation. It is with a heavy heart that I announce that today is my last day at the Shovel Museum. After almost 7 years working here, I have decided to accept a job at the Museum of Mops and Buckets. And will be moving there soon with my family. We've done amazing things together, and I'll never forget any of you. Thanks for everything, R." You know, if you have 7 years of work experience at the Shovel Museum, then by golly, you are the most qualified man around to work at the Museum of Mops and Buckets. Well, the poor guy seemed sad to be leaving his friends here at the Shovel Museum. We can only hope that his career change was a satisfying one and he lived happily ever after. But then we opened the bathroom door. And oh no, on the floor in the bathroom, we find the skeleton of a man clutching a bottle of rum and a shovel. This has got to be none other than R, the employee who tendered his resignation to work at the Museum of Mops and Buckets. He was so distraught over leaving his beloved Shovel Museum that he drank himself to death. Or perhaps the bombs dropped just after he finished writing his letter of resignation. He locked himself in this bathroom to avoid the fallout, and then he clutched his precious shovel close to his chest. He was heartbroken knowing that he was going to die without having ever had the opportunity to work in the Museum of Mops and Buckets. And to end his final hours, he raided the company's liquor cabinet and got as drunk as he could before he died. On the ground next to the nearby toilet, which is filled with potato crisps, we find 3 bottles of booze: wine, vodka, and whiskey. Looks like he succumbed to the fallout after having only finished the bottle of rum, but he was prepared to drink away many days here if he needed to. After looting the mirror and the first aid kit, there is little left to explore here in the Shovel Museum. If you have a jetpack, you can hop up on top, but if you don't, you can reach the roof of this building by jumping up on top of a nearby desk, cleverly leaping onto a broken wall, and then slowly climbing up the broken wall until we reach the roof. Here we see a number of large holes in the roof, and on one level, we find an ice cooler filled with Nuka Cola and wine. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the full and tragic story of Wixon's Shovel Museum in Nuka World. A place where Americans could go to learn everything they ever wanted to know about shovels owned by the rich and famous, and sometimes owned by their neighbors. Shovels used in films, or sometimes stunt shovels used in films. And prehistoric shovels, if they were made today, in Mexico. It was a place where one man spent 7 years of his life in perfect bliss and harmony until that fateful day when he resigned, only for the world to end. But I'm happy to know that there was a shovel with him in that bathroom to offer him comfort in his final moments. I hesitate to ask this. I'm afraid of what the comments may look like, but what are your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, about Wixon's Shovel Museum in Nuka World? I don't know about you. I realize it's silly, but I had so much fun exploring this Shovel Museum and laughing at these ridiculous plaques. Did you manage to find your way here in your gameplay? Or do you come here frequently to help your Nuka World raiders fight off their enemies? Let me know in the comments section below. I read all of your comments and I use your comments as inspiration for my future videos. I publish a new video 6 days a week, ladies and gentlemen, on a wide range of Fallout topics spanning all of the games. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss my next Fallout video, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you Tuesday morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.